back in 2020, pretty big deal at the time for me. It was a mid 100 unit apartment complex and it was really messed up. This one complex was getting the police called 5 times a week. It was crazy. And the day before closing, there's literally a shooting, bullet holes in the siding. This was sitting on almost an entire block and it was the worst property. So enough of you guys have asked for the deep dive into a most recent post, this post right here. This is a fun story. You know, it's back in 2020 when I was really getting going. Pretty big deal at the time for me. It was a mid 100 unit apartment complex and it was really messed up. I mean, it was an out of state owner, actually from California, owning this pretty large apartment complex, over 12 acres. Like I said, well over 100 units, and it had almost 40 vacancies at the time. But even worse, very high percentage, I think it was somewhere between 15 to 20% delinquency as well. And if you remember 2020, obviously you also had to contend with COVID. So there was just a lot going on. And when I acquired this property, I knew that I needed to get it for a great price. Obviously, I was able to secure it for a great price because of COVID, because of the amount of vacancy and the delinquency. But there is more than just what meets the eye. Part of the delinquency and the vacancy was the fact that this was sitting on almost an entire block and it was the worst property. I mean, there's residential houses around, but this one complex was getting the police called 5 times a week. It was crazy. And the day before closing, there's literally a shooting, bullet holes in the siding. So it's safe to say there was just a lot that needed to be done here. The property averaged 260 police calls per year the 2 years before I actually acquired it. So as you can imagine, safety was our top priority. And one thing I did before acquisition is I sat down and I met with the local police and I just asked them, hey, I'm acquiring this property. You guys are here all the time. It's obviously a nuisance. What can we do to work together to clean this up? So we kind of established a plan before even closing. That plan included 2 SWAT vehicles on both ends of the entrance to really raise attention. And we did that for the first 2 weeks. I was able to give a unit, I mean, there's plenty of vacancies, to local enforcement to camp out there, to use the unit for surveillance. And I was also able to secure them to walk the property with my team 3 times a week to really, again, just showcase the type of presence that we were having and that things were changing. That's what we did initially with the local enforcement, but there's also a huge amount of deferred maintenance and code violations. So they were actually getting fined weekly at this point because of all the different kinds of code violations and maintenance that weren't done. So again, just like meeting with the police, I met with the city. I asked for a 90-day extension so that we would have plenty of time to be able to make the corrections that are needed. And I asked if they could come on day 1 after I closed on it to walk every single violation that was currently for deferred maintenance, and we could kind of show them our plan. With the deferred maintenance and code violations, not only did we walk it, but we walked it with 4 different service technicians, so 4 of our best, and we were able to knock out every violation within 30 days, not 90. So this is something they've been trying to get rid of for years, and we did it in 30 days, which really just set like the kind of tone with the city of who we are, what we're about, that we're serious about maintaining this block of apartments to a much higher standard. And that really helped us for all the way to today, to be honest with you, just giving us the benefit of the doubt for anything that happens there. The police situation, you know, it was pretty rocky the first 90 days, but with their help and their presence and literally the SWAT vehicles, within the first week, we upgraded all the lighting. We just lit the freaking apartment complex up. It was kind of funny because we would just have 2 to 3 abandoned apartments, you know, every other day. Literally, the people that were selling drugs and not following the lease violations would just in the middle of the night grab all their stuff and move and get out of there. So the worst people in the property, the people causing all the problems for the residents that wanted a safe environment, were just leaving on their own, which was great, right? You know, we're transitioning the property, and instead of having to go through a formal eviction process, you know, they just kind of knew with all the police intervention and presence and us always on site, you know, bright lights now, that this was not going to be an apartment community that they can continue to do the things that they were previously doing. And the violence kind of left with them. So honestly, within 3 to 6 months, the majority of the bad things happening at the property were gone. I mean, last year we had a total of 13 police calls there all year. From 260, right, leading up until, and they're minor ones, minor police calls at that. So we haven't had a shooting since the acquisition as well too. The residential houses and the neighbors around this apartment community have been super thankful. In fact, the city has actually decided to build 14 homes next to this apartment community as well. And it just shows the level of investment that we have made and now the city's willing to make as well too. So that's a little bit of a deep dive outside of the numbers and just some of the quick things that we had to do to help with the crime and the deferred maintenance, and obviously just moving through tenant instability, really. Those external challenges amongst COVID, let alone, were really difficult to be able to navigate no matter what kind of upgrades we were going to do to the apartment complex if there's people living there that were making the apartment complex not safe. That's kind of where we started. Numbers wise, so when we took it over, I kind of shared with you the significant amount of vacancy and delinquency. It was very difficult to navigate. We were able to get that down substantially. We got it down to 9% vacancy and delinquency combined in the first 12 months. Feel really good about that considering it was near 40 plus. And we also had a ton of people just literally abandoning their units. So we're constantly fighting filling this place up. And we weren't just filling it, we're rehabbing the unit. So I think in my post, I referenced that I lost $700,000 in the first year. I mean, that's $60,000 a month. And I own this thing 100%. So if you imagine, that is a huge amount of money going out the door every single month. And the majority of that was CapEx. We were driving substantial lot of money into it. I mean, from parking lots that needed to be redone that were never touched, to landscaping, to garbage corrals, to the sheer amount of units that have never been touched since this thing was built. I mean, these were not easy rehabs. So much of that done in the first 12 months. Really, any amount of money that I was actually making would have been reinvested back into the property plus 60K, right? Since I was in the whole 700,000. So really, really tough year in year one and just a ton of transitions. But I would tell you after that first 12 months, you could feel it. I mean, you could walk the apartment community and it felt so much safer. The higher quality residents that we're putting in there were telling us that they enjoyed the rehab, they enjoyed the new look, and slowly the reputation was trying to change. That's one thing that's very difficult is when an apartment community has a bad reputation, very difficult in the city to get other people to take a chance on that apartment community. So we really spent a lot of money on rebranding in year two, changing the name, the signing, upgrading the common areas, and continuing to make sure that we're doing everything we can to have a positive experience just around that area. And that continued to help us be able to rehab, fill, and drive down the overall vacancy and delinquency numbers. We also did other things, right? We're shifting market rents. Before, nobody would pay a lot of money here, right? Because it wasn't safe, the units weren't rehabbed. So now we're moving market rents significantly. So a lot of these units with all the rehab and the better conditions, we were able to charge quite a bit more for rent. We're also able to implement different other income strategies, like making sure that tenants were paying for their own utilities, charging for pets. Before there was not pets allowed. Now we brought in pets. We replaced all the laundry machines. So now residents had an opportunity to do their laundry there, which also increased our other income. So we were able to increase the overall operating income by about $200,000 from year one to year two. But more importantly, we were able to increase the NOI by about $150,000. So we're holding the line on operating expenses, why we spent a lot on CapEx, and significantly increasing the overall profitability. But as my post said, still lost $100,000 when you add back in the amount of CapEx that I'm spending on this property. So for the first 2 years, all the money that the property made, if you include CapEx, was taken away, and I was actually in the hole $800,000. Not very good, but what I started to see is now vacancy and delinquency was at 5.2% from 9% the year before. Now we're much closer to market rents. Now I have rehabbed the majority of the property. Now most of the renters are paying for the other income that they should have been paying for in the first place. And it's much easier to be able to run a property with residents that care, units that are rehabbed. You're not gonna have the same amount of maintenance calls when every appliance is upgraded new, right? And you could just see it turning a corner. So we were able to increase the NOI the next year by another 100,000, but did not have to spend very much CapEx. Most of that CapEx was done. So total profit made that year jumped from -100 to 303,000, which is pretty significant. More importantly, from that year, this was a great time, 2022 into 2023. Rates were still relatively low, they were on the rise, and I was able to execute very large 7-digit refi. So this was an opportunity for me to get the majority of my CapEx actually back because now the properties were considerably more. The appraisal more than doubled the value that I paid for this apartment complex. And my lender was willing to, after walking the property and seeing all the change, seeing the consistency in operating income, the vacancy in line, the delinquency in line, just the overall look and feel felt so much better, but the financials matched it too. I was able to pull out a ton of money from this deal. So after going through all that pain, right, all the suffering, all the change, all the transition, losing a significant amount of money, I was able to get all of that back in a refinance while keeping the property. And here's something cool. Even after that refi, the following year, I was able to make $515,000. So in year 4, I've already executed a 7-digit refi on the property, and the property is still producing over $500,000 a year now. So you can imagine, just like I'm looking at the gross operating income today, which is almost 3 times what it was when I took over. We've increased the operating income. The demand is there. People want to live there, and we rehabbed it the right way, right? We've changed the reputation, and we've done that through more than just money, the experience that we're providing residents, and we've been able to hold the line overall when it comes to operating expenses. That again is done through CapEx as well. CapEx shouldn't just increase your operating income, it should stabilize your operating expenses. If you have a property of over 100 units that never have been rehabbed before, that has a ton of deferred maintenance, your operating expenses in something like maintenance and repairs is going to be significantly higher than if you have fixed all those root causes the right way. You spent money, you did the roofs, you did the parking lots, the garbage corrals, the common areas, the laundry rooms, the actual units themselves. You should expect your maintenance and repairs to go down, especially if you're using quality materials. So you actually can see your operating income go up, but your operating expenses either stay the same, because there are things like utilities, property taxes, insurance that are surely going to go up. But you could actually lower at a property like this, a C, B class property, the actual maintenance and repairs or community operating expenses as well too. And that's exactly what we did. The lesson from this is, as I said in my post, this was one of my bigger acquisitions in my career at that time. And I felt super fortunate that I didn't have investors in this deal, because it was hard and I had to make a lot of quick decisions, and the first 2 years weren't fun, but I got to do everything the right way. The majority of my properties I want to own for the rest of my life. So making significant investments quickly, although painful, losing as much money as I did per month, was the right decision, because I knew ultimately if I was able to do that, I would be able to reap the benefits and the rewards later like I am today. And I get to reap all those rewards because I took all the risk and I didn't have investors in the project. And it allowed me to go quicker because I didn't have to answer to them. Instead of concentrating all my time on updates, I could concentrate all my time on the business plan and the things that my company was doing to be able to run the property better. And that's exactly what we did. We totally changed the reputation, the experience, the look, and even who was living there, to make sure that we provided a safe environment, an environment where people had pride in where they lived. And now, not only us, but the city is making significant investments in this area as well too. And I expect this apartment complex to continue to do really, really well. Doesn't matter if this is a huge, 100-unit apartment complex. Like I started with single family home, duplexes, 4 units, 8 units. You can start small too. And if you own it all, I highly encourage you to go through that pain phase, right? Do it the right way. Make sure you hold people accountable to following the law, following the lease policies, so that you have people that care about the property. Because if you have people that care about the property and the upgrades that you're doing, you're obviously going to be able to charge a fair amount of operating income and rent, and they'll respect that and they'll stay. and you will have a lot easier time being able to continue to operate that property. And then hopefully one day you can execute a refinance just like I did and get the majority of that CapEx back out. So this was a really fun project. The last thing I would just share is that once you acquire the property, the riskiest time that you are gonna ever own that property is from the day you acquire it, day one, not a day to celebrate that you close it. It's a day to get to work, to when you hit refi, or if you decide to sell. I would prefer refinance. That time in between, that repositioning phase, is not only very painful, but obviously that pain is very risky because you're putting a ton of your own capital back into the investment that you just put capital to acquire it. And then the only way that you can get a return on that money is to fully stabilize and obviously transform the property. And that takes a lot more than just money, right? And CapEx. That takes strategic direction to make sure that you have the right residents and the right people operating that apartment complex. So it's very difficult. And I would just say it's much easier after the property is stabilized. So if you're buying an A-class apartment complex, this video is probably not helpful at all. But if you're buying anything that's value add in the C and B and something that's as messy as this, most of my acquisitions are not this messy, you really wanna make sure your business plan is solidified well before closing. I mean, just think about what I did with the city and with the police before I even closed this deal. That kind of stuff you can't put a price on. That kind of stuff significantly moves forward your business plan. So if you have any more questions, go ahead and hit me in the comments. I can't give actual numbers or addresses or anything like that. Obviously, it's confidential, but if there's anything around the repositioning process that I can help you with, let me know.